So on Friday afternoon, there was an announcement for a new Thundercats reboot called Thundercats ROAR that would be airing on Cartoon Network in 2019, and the reaction to it has pretty much been overwhelmingly negative. When I first saw the news, I didn't really think of it much. I mean, for a few days, I was more or less on the side, like, this reboot, it doesn't look fucking bad. I mean, it looks radically different from, like, what we've seen other animated Thundercats properties in the past. But, maybe it'll grow on us. But little did I know just how bad the backlash would be. Kind of reminded me of, like, how people would just hate on, like, Teen Titans Go, That was, like, an action, more of a fucking comedy than an action show like the 2003 show. But over time, I've kind of more or less taken on more of a middle ground towards, like, the Thundercats ROAR show, which I'll probably explain right now. Let's see. Honestly, the character designs, I can see why people aren't really liking them, because it's more or less just emblematic of, like, the the so-called Cal Art style that's pretty much been, like, dominating, like, most Cartoon Network and Disney shows in the 2010s. Like, that's more or less just the trend. Like, you get, like, these comedic shows and you just give them, like, features such as, like, thin lines, like, more rounded shapes for the character designs, and it honestly really doesn't fit a show like Thundercats, which more or less grew out of this, like, 80s action cartoon market that was just made to sell toys. Since you gotta remember, at the time it was more or less competing with other cartoons of its ilk, like G.I. Joe and He-Man, which, like, had character designs that were more or less outsourced to Japanese studios, which you could confuse it for anime, but I fucking know that it really is an anime, since it's more or less made for a Western audience. And Thundercats ROAR is just, like, emblematic of, like, trying to appeal more to a Western audience than just being, like, I don't know, anime inspired, like getting just a Japanese studio to do it. I mean, that's literally what the 2011 Thundercats reboot was, just, like, getting outsourcing to a Japanese studio, Studio 4C. Of which I have to say, even though I never really liked the 2011 Thundercats reboot, story-wise, I think, like, its art direction was pretty solid. I mean, I thought it looked a lot better than fucking Avatar: The Last Airbender, but that's just me being a contrarian. But yeah, like, 2010's been a weird time for cartoons. Like, it started out strong with, like, Cartoon Network was, like, greenlighting a bunch of interesting shows aimed for, like, older audiences, like Adventure Time, Regular Show, Symbionic Titan. But it's like, but as, like, the decade has gone on, they've just gotten, I don't know, they've just gotten a lot more formulaic with, like, their shows, like, and that's one thing that bothers me from, like, the anti-ROAR side, is that they're just lumping in the style Thundercats ROAR with other, like, cartoons that look similar to it, even though they all have different feels. Like, I'm not going to tell you that Steven Universe and OKKO are the same show when I fucking know for a fact they aren't. And it's just, like, it's even more, like, disingenuous to basically just, like, compare storyboards of Avatar: The Last Airbender with, like, just rough, like, I don't know, whiteboard doodles of, like, Thundercats ideas, and probably, well, I can't really call them storyboards, since, it's probably more just like a story meeting. But yeah, like, I would have initially said, like, the people whining about the show were, like, the biggest offenders, but I have to say some of the industry professionals defending this aren't really acting any better. Like, they're more or less just saying that this show isn't made for like adults, it's made for kids. And while I know that most cartoons on Cartoon Network are for kids, that doesn't excuse them for like wanting to, for like, you know, good writing and like good characters and I guess good animation as well. But I don't know, I'm not really much of an animation expert, and it's just really disheartening to see like people working in the industry not necessarily working on the show, just like harassing and picking the hornet's nest that is the displeased fans. You know, it's just a clusterfuck. Like, I don't know like what to think of it anymore. All I'm thinking is that like when it comes out next year, it's probably going to be dumped on like Saturday mornings at 7 a.m. when like no one is awake. It's probably just going to die there. I mean, another thing is that like people, I mean, if you want to like compare Thundercats ROAR to anything, don't compare it to like Steven Universe. Compare it more to like all the other action cartoon reboots that like Cartoon Network has done over the years. Or I guess starting with Teen Titans Go now. Teen Titans Go, that has proven to be like one of the most divisive shows, I guess, in a long while. Mainly because like when it first came out, a lot of people didn't necessarily like the fact that these characters from a show they once liked were now being like chibi-fied in more of a comedy cartoon with some action on the side. But as it went on, it started to get more of this, like, I don't know, reactionary tone where it would just like mock people who like were overreacting to it, and for good reason. But over time it's just kind of gotten stale. Though if I will say anything, Teen Titans Go has probably the best character designs, because it's like I can still get a read on who these characters are without having to like cringe. And also the Flash animation is kind of solid. I mean, it's nowhere near as bad as fucking Johnny Test, but I can understand why people would be like really upset with Teen Titans Go, because like once again it's just a comedy cartoon with superheroes in it. Like, that's not really anything unique. The only unique thing is like how meta they've gotten as of late, and how like they've just turned the silliness up to 11. Then the next reboots are actually ones based off Cartoon Network properties. Powerpuff Girls 2016 got pretty much the most obvious reaction you could. It was a piece of shit that really had no idea whether or not it wanted to be its own thing or faithful to the Powerpuff Girls from the late 90s, early 2000s. And it's basically just like a watered down version with barely any action, just a bunch of random humor, a bunch of like really awkwardly placed like fan service, like getting certain voice actors to reprise their characters while changing the voices of the girls themselves. Really unappealing like art, really samey art style that just makes it look more generic compared to the original, along with a shitload of animation errors and just a bunch of like really lame gimmicks, like adding a fourth Powerpuff Girl. It's like that show was trying so hard to just be a failure, but no one really cares about it anymore. It's just been forgotten by Cartoon Network. And then we got like the live action Ben 10 reboot, which I'd say, and this is a controversial opinion, but it's probably the most faithful to the original adaptation, because it's just got Ben, Gwen, and Grandpa Max just traveling the country, fighting evil doers and other aliens, when Ben still transforms into aliens. But this time it has more of an emphasis on comedy than the original. It's just a lot goofier, and also the character designs, especially like the background characters. It's just really unappealing. It fucking looks like the shit you'd see in Go Animate. Though I haven't really seen much of the Ben 10 reboot, but all I can really say is it's probably the most faithful and really hasn't stirred up as much fucking controversy. And that's just it. What does Thundercats Roar offer to the table besides like a pretty neat looking intro and just like really ugly character designs to make them look like fucking children? I mean, I remember one guy on Twitter talking about like how you can't really get a read on their character designs. Like, look at Lion-O, for example. Is he supposed to be like this strong, heroic leader, or is he just like some fucking kid or sausage? I don't know. It's just like if these people working on the show love the original so much or hate it, do you think that like shitting on, like just giving us these shitty character designs is really going to like make anyone actually like give it a chance? No, because at least with stuff like Gravity Falls, Steven Universe, Star Versus, they may have simple character designs, but you can at least tell there's some like artistry being put in there, even if it's on a TV budget, or in the case of Steven Universe, most of the story, it's just all done with storyboards, and most of them aren't really good. Like drawing on model. And I guess lastly, I should probably talk about like how I think it's really weird that they would reboot it pretty much right now when we already had a Thundercats reboot this decade, which I talked about it a bit. Again, I didn't really like it when I saw it. I only watched it because it aired on like Toonami in 2012, but I'm just gonna guess as to why it got fucking canceled. I think it got canceled because, not because like it wasn't getting enough ratings, but because it wasn't getting enough ratings from the right demographics, i.e. children, probably boys ages 6 to 11. And you know, like how Cartoon Network always had this weird thing, and that no one's ever really talked about. Like, I mean, you've had people bitch about them canceling shows like Symbiotic Titan and Samurai Jack, but never really gotten people trying to rationalize why they were canceled. And I think Thundercats was canceled because it was getting views, but it was probably mostly getting views from adults because, well, if you've seen the 2011 reboot, you can tell it was obviously aimed and written for a more adult audience. And it just just seemed not really like the kind of show that like some boy ages 6 to 11 would watch, or hell, even buy the toys. I'm trying to remember if there were like any Thundercats 2011 toys when that was a thing. Probably there were, but I can't really remember, since at that time I was too old to like go to like Toys R Us and buy shit. But yeah, like everyone doing these whole conspiracy theories about like Cartoon Network just hating the show and just wanting to like write it off as a tax loss. I don't fucking believe that shit. I'm sorry. I just believe that not enough kids were watching it. And that's why they basically moved its time slot from like Friday nights to Saturday mornings, of which like they canceled it after like 26 episodes. And then like later on, Adult Swim picked it up and just aired it on Toonami, where from what I heard it did a lot better on there, since it was actually aimed for an older audience. Though they eventually lost the rights to it because, well, I don't know, it's fucking Warner. You know, that corporate synergy really is pretty flimsy between Turner and Warner when you think about it, but that's another rant for another time. So in conclusion, I'm not expecting really anything from Thundercats Roar. I don't expect the animation to be as good as the intro by Studio Yoda. I don't really expect it to be as offensive as Teen Titans Go. and I don't expect it to really have like an identity crisis like Powerpuff 2016. I'm just expecting it to be another freaking like action cartoon reboot, more of an emphasis on comedy that's probably going to air Saturday mornings on Cartoon Network when no one's watching, and they'll probably just have ordered like 1 or 2 seasons and then just forget it. I mean, it's really sad that action cartoons really aren't like getting as much chances these days. I mean, pretty much you have to just like hope get it out to streaming. Like, see how successful DreamWorks Voltron has been on Netflix, and how people have really liked the Castlevania series Predator. I mean, fuck it, cable TV's dead. This whole thing was a fucking joke. Anyway, yeah, that was my rant on Thundercats ROAR. I'm Jacob. I I'm part of this podcast I do with Tris every 2 weeks. It's honestly a terrible podcast. I'm not gonna lie about it, but I still do it anyway because it's fun. You can harass me on Twitter at JackStripes2. All I just do is retweet cartoon and anime shit like a degenerate. And you can all go die in a hole, I guess.